A few nights after meeting Roy and Herman, I used one of the cigarettes, which was my first experience with junk. A cigarette is like a toothpaste tube with a needle on the end. You push a pin down through the needle, the pin punctures the seal, and the cigarette is ready to shoot. Morphine hits the backs of the legs first, then the back of the neck. A spreading wave of relaxation, slackening the muscles away from the bones so that you seem to float without outlines, like lying in warm salt water. As this relaxing wave spread, I experienced a strong feeling of fear. I had the feeling that some horrible image was just beyond the field of vision, moving as I turned my head so that I never quite saw it. I felt nauseous. I lay down and closed my eyes. A series of pictures passed like watching a movie. A huge neon-lighted cocktail bar that got larger and larger until streets, traffic, and street repairs were included in it. A waitress carrying a skull on a tray, stars in the clear sky, the physical impact of the fear of death, the shutting off of breath, the stopping of blood. I dozed off and woke up with a start of fear. Next morning I vomited and felt sick until noon. Roy called that night. About what we were discussing the other night, he said, I could go about $4 per box and take 5 boxes now. Are you busy? I'll come over to your place. We'll come to some kind of agreement. A few minutes later, he knocked at the door. He had on a Glen plaid suit and a dark, coffee-coated shirt. We said hello, and he looked around blankly and said, If you don't mind, I'll take one of those now. I opened the box. He took out a cigarette and injected it into his leg. He pulled up his pants briskly and took out $20. I put 5 boxes on the kitchen table. I think I'll take them out of the boxes, he said. Too bulky. He began putting the cigarettes into his coat pockets. I don't think they'll perforate this way, he said. Listen, I'll call you again in a day or so after I get rid of these and have some more money. Next day he was back. He shot another cigarette and pulled out $40. I laid out 10 boxes and kept 2. These are for me, I said. He looked at me surprised. You use it? Now and then. It's bad stuff, he said, shaking his head. The worst thing that can happen to a man. We all think we can control it at first. Sometimes we don't want to control it. He laughed. I'll take all you can get at that price. Next day he was back. He asked if I didn't want to change my mind about selling the 2 boxes. I said no. He bought 2 cigarettes for $1 each, shot them both, and left. During the next month, I used up the 8 cigarettes I had not sold. The fear I had experienced after using the first cigarette was not noticeable after the third, but still, from time to time after taking a shot, I would wake up with a start of fear. After 6 weeks or so, I gave Roy a ring. I said, Say, do you have any to sell of the material I sold you before? There was a pause. Yes, he said, I can let you have 6, but the price will have to be $3 per. You understand, I don't have many. "Okay," I said, "you know the way. Bring it on over." It was 12 1/2 grain tablets in a thin glass tube. I paid him $18, and he apologized again for the retail rate. Next day he bought 2 grains back. "It's mighty hard to get now at any price," he said, looking for a vein in his leg and shot the liquid in. Later that day, Roy pointed out to me a drugstore where they sold needles without any questions. Very few drugstores will sell them without a prescription. He showed me how to make a collar out of paper to fit the needle to an eyedropper. An eyedropper is easier to use than a regular hypo, especially for giving yourself vein shots. Several days later, Roy sent me to see a doctor with a story about kidney stones to hit him for a morphine prescription. The doctor's wife slammed the door in my face, but Roy finally got past her and made the doctor for a 10-grain script. The doctor's office was in junk territory on 102nd Street off Broadway. He was a doddering old man and could not resist the junkies who filled his office and were, in fact, his only patients. It seemed to give him a feeling of importance to look out and see an office full of people. Roy shipped out at 2 or 3 week intervals. His trips were Army transport and generally short. When he was in town, we generally split a few scripts. The old croaker on 102nd finally lost his mind altogether, and no drugstore would fill his scripts. But Roy located an Italian doctor out in the Bronx who would write. I was taking a shot from time to time, but I was a long way from having a habit. At this time, I moved into an apartment on the Lower East Side. It was a tenement apartment with a front door opening into the kitchen. One day, Herman told me about a kilo of first-class New Orleans weed I could pick up for $70. Bushing weed looks good on paper, like fur farming or raising frogs. At 75 cents a stick, 70 sticks to the ounce, it sounded like money. I was convinced and bought the weed. Herman and I formed a partnership to push the weed. We located a lesbian named Marion who lived in the village and said she was a poetess. We kept the weed in Marion's apartment, turned her on for all she could use, and gave her 50% on sales. But she knew a lot of tea-heads. Another lesbian moved in with her, and every time I went to Marion's apartment, there was this huge red-haired Lizzie watching me with her cold fish eyes full of stupid hate. One day, the red-haired Lizzie opened the door and stood there, her face dead white and puffy with Nebatol sleep. She shoved the package of weed at me. "Take this and get out," she said. "You're both motherfuckers." She was half asleep. Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if referring to actual incest. I said, "Tell Marion thanks for everything." She slammed the door. The noise evidently woke her up. She opened the door again and began screaming with hysterical rage. We could still hear her out on the street. Herman contacted other tea-heads. They all gave us static. In practice, pushing weed is a headache. To begin with, weed is bulky. You need a full suitcase to realize any money. If the cops start kicking your door in, it's like being with a bale of alfalfa. Tea-heads are not like junkies. A junkie hands you the money, takes his junk, and cuts. But tea-heads don't do things that way. They expect the peddler to light them up and sit around talking for half an hour to sell $2 worth of weed. If you come right to the point, they say you're a bring-down. In fact, a peddler should not come right on and say he is a peddler. No, he just scores for a few good cats and chicks because he is viperish. Everyone knows that he himself is the connection, but it is bad form to say so. God knows why. To me, tea-heads are unfathomable. I soon found out I couldn't get along with these characters, and I was glad to find someone to take the tea off my hands at cost. I decided right then I would never push any more tea. In 1937, weed was placed under the Harrison Narcotics Act. Narcotics authorities claim it is a habit-forming drug, that its use is injurious to mind and body, and that it causes the people who use it to commit crimes. Here are the facts. Weed is positively not habit-forming. You can smoke weed for years, and you will experience no discomfort if your supply is suddenly cut off. I have seen tea-heads in jail, and none of them showed withdrawal symptoms. I smoked weed myself, off and on, for 15 years, and never missed it when I ran out. There is less habit to weed than there is to tobacco. Weed does not harm the general health. In fact, most users claim it gives you an appetite and acts as a tonic to the system. I was shooting every day now. Herman had moved into my apartment on Henry Street. It would not have occurred to Herman to pay rent himself. He had lived in other people's apartments all his life. Roy was giving himself a long shore leave. He located a doctor in Brooklyn who was a writing fool. This croaker would go 3 scripts a day for as high as 30 tablets a script. Every now and then he would get dubious on the deal, but the sight of money always straightened him out. There are several varieties of writing croakers. Some will write only if they are convinced you are an addict. Others only if they are convinced you are not. Most addicts put down a story worn smooth by years of use. Some claim gallstones or kidney stones. This is the story most generally used, and a croaker will often get up and open a door as soon as you mention gallstones. I got better results with facial neuralgia once I looked up the symptoms and committed them to memory. Roy had an operation scar on his stomach that he used to support his gallstone routine. There's one old-time doctor who lived in a Victorian brownstone in the West 70s. With him, it was simply necessary to present a gentlemanly front. If you could get into his inner office, you had it made. But he would write only 3 prescriptions. Another doctor was always drunk, and it was a matter of catching him at the right time. Often he wrote the prescription wrong, and you had to take it back for correction. Then, like as not, he would say the prescription was a forgery and tear it up. Still another doctor was senile, and you had to help him write the script. He would forget what he was doing, put down the pen, and go into a long reminiscence about the high class of patients he used to have. Especially he likes to talk about a man named General Gore, who once said to him, "Doctor, I've been to the Mayo Clinic, and you know more medicine than the whole clinic put together." There was no stopping him, and the exasperated addict was forced to listen patiently. Generally speaking, old doctors are more apt to write than the young ones. Refugee doctors were a good field for a while, but the addicts burned them down. Often a doctor will blow his top at the mention of narcotics and threaten to call the law.